Hello everyone. So I hope you all are great. And again, we are here with a very important content for all those who are preparing for the HPJS, that is the Himachal Pradesh Judicial Services. So the exam is almost there. And we are here with some of the most important questions of HPJS, all right? And these are basically the preliminary exam questions. That is, I will be dealing with certain MCQs which are important for all those who are appearing for Himachal Pradesh Judicial Services. So I'll be dealing with 50 questions in this video, and other than that the next video will cover the other part of these questions basically. But again, आज हम जो questions deal करेंगे will not be dealing with the correct answer only. Rather than that, I'll be giving you a quick recap or a quick introduction of all the concepts जिस पे वो questions होंगे. So we'll be just discussing the introduction of all those concepts along with answering the questions, and we will also be discussing कि अगर ऐसे questions आते हैं तो आपको उनको कैसे tackle करना होता है. For example, the assertion and the proposition based questions. So chalo, let's start without wasting further time. Let's just start with the questions. So these are the most important questions, 100 questions. This is the part 1 of the entire series. This series consists of 100 questions. I'll be dealing with 50 of them. So the question number 1 is from CPC. The first segment that we are taking is CPC. The jurisdiction of the courts may be barred in certain civil suits, either dash or dash by the law. Now, we know this very clearly because this is a question from one of the most important topic of CPC, that is the jurisdiction of civil courts, which is dealt under section 9 of CPC. And we know that as per the language of section 9 made, there are two types of bars which are given. The general rule is that every court will have a jurisdiction to try the suits or the jurisdiction for the suits of civil nature. But there are two bars which are given in section 9. Certain bars which are basically given in the CPC itself are known as the express bars, for example, res judicata. But there are certain bars which are implied bars which are not given in CPC, but then they are given in other laws. So these are the subject matter jurisdictions. So basically, यहाँ पे the answer will be express bar as well as implied bar. So express and implied means explicit. Explicit means express. Implied. All right. So the answer is A as per section 9 of CPC. Next. So this is the entire section 9. Let's look at question number 2. The rule of constructive res judicata. Constructive means by construct. Construct means again implied. So as we all know that the rule of res judicata has been dealt under section 11 of CPC. But section 11 does not only deals with express res judicata. It also deals with constructive, that is implied res judicata. That means कि as per section 11, res judicata is when any question which was the matter in issue in which in a suit which has been already decided by a competent court. That matter in issue cannot be in dispute in another suit. So that is basically a bar कि एक matter in issue जब एक suit के अंदर finally decide कर दिया गया है, उसी matter in issue पे there cannot be a second suit, the bar of res judicata. This bar of res judicata includes an implied res judicata. That means the rule of res judicata implies upon the express matter in issues as well as those matter in issues which ought to have been raised in the previous suit, but they were not expressly raised in the previous suit. For those implied matters in issue also, the second suit or the subsequent suit cannot be filed, जिसको बोला जाता है constructive res judicata, which is dealt under the one of the explanations of section 11. So the question is कि इनमें से कौन सा explanation deals with constructive res judicata? So this is a direct question which clearly means कि यहाँ पे एक आपको direct answer देना है. ये question is not a conceptual question. They're directly asking about the explanation number. So the correct answer is option C, that is section 11 explanation number 4 deals with constructive res judicata. अब यहाँ पे let's look at कि बाकी के explanations क्या कहते हैं, because section 11 is one of the important topic of CPC. अब explanation 2 is not the correct answer. Why? Because we know that it deals with the competency of the court. Explanation number 3 deals with the matter in issue. Explanation number 1 deals with the definition of a former suit. So the answer is explanation number 4. और यही आपको इस explanation में दिया भी गया है. Section 11 explanation number 4. So what does it say? Any matter which might and ought to have been the ground of defense or attack in such former suit shall be deemed to have been matter directly and substantially in issue in such suit. So the matter which was not expressly in issue, but it was impliedly in issue, which ought to have been raised. So the bar of res judicata will apply upon that matter in issue also, known as constructive res judicata. Question number 2. Question number 2, okay, that is the explanation of the entire section. Question number 3 पे आते हैं. So I am not reading the explanations given in this PDF because I am explaining it to you. So मैं आपको वही explain कर रही हूँ. Therefore I am not reading it word to word, but then I am explaining it. I am explaining the gist of it. All right. So question number 3 says A files a suit against B in which he claims 2 reliefs. So basically A ने B के against एक suit file किया in which he has claimed 2 types of reliefs. First relief is the recovery of rent and the second relief is the interest on such rent. So the question is, court granted only the recovery of rent and doesn't say anything on the relief of interest on rent. So the interest which was expressly asked but not expressly granted by the court. क्या उस रिलीफ के लिए जो आपने एक बार सूट में आस्क किया था, प्रे किया था, प्लीड किया था, बट द कोर्ट डिड नॉट एक्सप्रेसली ग्रांट सच रिलीफ. सो द क्वेश्चन हियर इज कि अकॉर्डिंग टू सेक्शन 11 ऑफ सीपीसी whether A can bring a fresh suit for such interest. And we all know that section 11 explanation 5 deals with this particular thing. All right. So basically the answer to this question will be no, that this relief will be barred by res judicata. As I just said, explanation number 5. Explanation number 5 में दिया गया है that any relief which is claimed by the plaintiff in the plaint but it is not expressly granted by the decree. So for such relief no second suit shall be entertained. That is res judicata. Option B is the correct answer, that no suit can be filed. Next is no attachment under a precept. Precept which is dealt under section 46 of CPC. So no attachment under a precept continue for more than dash months unless extended by the issuing court. So basically this is also a direct question कि कितने टाइम तक वो जो प्रिसेप्ट के अंडर जो अटैचमेंट की गई है it will be in basically it will be valid. So the answer here is option C, that is 2 months, and it is expressly given under section 46. Precept is what? Precept is basically an attachment, basically an order by the court which has passed the decree. So upon the application of the decree holder makes an application to the court which has passed the decree. The court which has passed the decree, when receives the application of the decree holder which contains a request for attachment, so that court makes a precept, an order or a direction to another court which is going to execute the decree to attach the property of the judgment debtor. और उसी attachment की validity पूछी गई है, that is 2 months. So option B is the correct answer. Okay, next आते हैं. Question number 5. In which rule of order 1 of CPC provision for misjoinder and non-joinder of parties has been laid down. So we all know this is also a direct question, and we all know that Order 1, Rule 9 of CPC deals with the provision for misjoinder and non-joinder. All right, so the answer will be option C. इसका जो explanation है, it gives the exact explanation or description of Order 1 Rule 9, which says that no suit shall be defeated by the reason that there was a misjoinder or a non-joinder of party if the suit can be dealt as per the parties which are appearing on the suit. तो जो parties अभी हैं, अगर उसके according suit को dispose of किया जा सकता है, so only due to misjoinder or non-joinder, the suit shall not be defeated. So basically this is Order 1 Rule 9. That is the correct answer. Question number 6, again CPC. Under which rule of Order 1 of CPC provision for representative suit has been laid down? Ab Order 1 Rule 8 of CPC, that is option B. We know that representative suit Order 1 Rule 8 of CPC में दिया गया है, and one more reference of representative suit is there in section 11 also. Section 11 explanation number 6 में भी representative suit का एक reference दिया गया है. Similarly, Order 1 Rule 8 में representative suit को deal किया गया है. So the answer will be B. And what is representative suit? Representative suit is basically a suit filed by a particular representative. The person who is filing the suit is representing the interest of number of people who have an interest, a same interest in the suit. So जब एक ही subject matter में बहुत सारे लोगों का interest है, rather than filing for different suits by different people having same interest, what is better for the matter of propriety and prudence? It is better that one representative on their behalf should file a single suit. So that is known as representative suit given in Order 1 Rule 8. B is the correct option. So this is the explanation. Question number 7, where is the provision for interpleader provided in CPC? So we all know that interpleader suit is given in section 88 as well as Order 35. So the answer will be both A and B. D is the correct answer. जहां पे बोला गया है दोनों में दिया गया है interpleader suit. Section 88 also and Order 35 also. Interpleader suit is what? Interpleader suit is when several persons, numerous persons, they adversely claim an interest in a particular property or a debt. And this interest is claimed against a person who has no interest in that property other than the charges or the cost of suit or the proceeding. So interpleader suit is basically to decide the interest as to who among the all, जो भी जिन लोगों का adverse interest है उस property में, उस debt में, उनमें से actually interest उसका किस में है, that is the suit. For determining such question, the suit is known as the interpleader suit, which has been dealt under section 88, for which the procedure has been given under Order 35. So D is the correct option. So this is the explanation. यहाँ पे explanation दिया गया है. Section 88 को यहाँ पे दिया गया है. Other than that, it has been written Order 35 deals with the interpleader suit. Basically, Order 35 deals with the procedure of interpleader suit. Next, in respect of Order 6 Rule 17 of CPC, choose the correct statement. अब यहाँ पे these questions are the most tricky ones. Because यहाँ पे कई बार students हरी में correct को incorrect, incorrect को correct read कर लेते हैं. So you have to ensure that you are very careful in reading the question. Because ultimately if you know the answer, but if you have read the question wrongly, then doesn't matter कि आपको answer आता था या नहीं आता था. So make it a habit कि जितना भी exam pressure है, you have to read the questions very carefully. यहाँ पे you have to answer that among the two, which one is the correct statement. So now let's just read both these statements and then we'll decide. As per Order 6 Rule 17, Order 6 Rule 17, which deals with amendment of pleadings. क्या दिया गया है? द कोर्ट में at any stage of the proceedings allow either party to alter or amend his pleadings in such manner and on such terms as may be just. So ये हमें पता है that this is correct. Order 6 Rule 17 का जो main provision है, this is dealt in this. आगे क्या दिया गया है? Application for the amendment shall be allowed after the trial has commenced. Now I am having a doubt in statement number 2. Statement number 1 तो ठीक है, but statement number 2 is doubtful. Why? Because we have read section order 6 Rule 17 in which it has been said the general rule is that the amendment of pleading shall not be allowed after the trial has commenced. It will be allowed after the trial has commenced only in certain exceptional situation that has been given in order 6 Rule 17 itself. So the correct answer here will be C. See, यहाँ पे क्या दिया गया है कि both the statements are correct, both the statements are not correct, both the statements are incorrect. दोनों statements incorrect भी नहीं है because the first one is correct. So only one is correct. We know that option B, statement number B, is incorrect. So option C is the correct answer. That only statement number 1 is the correct statement, not statement number B. And it has been mentioned also. See, यहाँ पे order 6 Rule 17 verbatim दिया गया है, जिसके proviso, when we look at the proviso to such rule, it has been clearly said that no application for amendment shall be allowed after the trial has commenced. Unless, that means only in this exceptional situation, the trial, after the trial has commenced, the amendment will be allowed. Otherwise, as a matter of general rule, amendment in pleading will not be allowed after the trial has commenced. Next question is again an assertion and reason question. ऐसे questions में भी students को बहुत difficulty होती है because यहाँ पे you are not expected to answer as to which one is correct. हाँ, हो सकता है कि इसमें से कोई एक wrong हो सकता है कि ये दोनों ही सही हो. साथ साथ में आपको ये भी देखना होता है that whether this reason is the correct reasoning for the assertion or not. Maybe दोनों correct होंगे, but just because these two are correct, that doesn't mean that this reason is the correct reasoning for the assertion. So you have to check both, whether the statements are correct and whether R is the correct reasoning for A. So ऐसे question में आपको एक double check करना होता है. Let's just read क्या दिया गया है. Assertion is under CPC, a decree is always final. A decree is always final, and we know that a decree which is defined under section 2 clause 2 of CPC, which means कि वहां पे clearly दिया गया है a decree can be either a final decree or a preliminary decree or even a preliminary partly preliminary and partly final. So a decree need not always be final. So A does not look right, but B says under CPC a decree conclusively determines the rights of the parties in suit. Yes, यही definition section 2 के अंदर CPC की जो decree की definition है वो दी गई है. So R looks correct, but A looks wrong. इसीलिए the answer will be D. A is false, but R is true. And when we look at the explanation to this question, the verbatim provision of 2 clause 2 of CPC has been given which defines decree, and इसके last में जब हम देखते हैं तो इधर clearly दिया गया है may be preliminary or final. So decree need not always be final, it may be preliminary also. So option D is the correct option. Arrange the following sections in chronological order under CPC. इसको हमें chronological order में set करना है. So review, reference and revision. अब ये pure section based है, section number based है. We know section 113 defines the reference, deals with the reference. 114, section 114 deals with review. And then section 115 of CPC deals with revision. So the order will be 2, 1 and 3. So the answer is B. B is 2, 1 and 3. 113, 114, 115. 2, 1, 3 is the correct order. So that has been given 113, 114, 115. Option B is the correct answer. Next, which of the following provision of Indian Evidence Act? Now we are over with the segment of CPC. Now we are going to start with the segment of Indian Evidence Act. क्या दिया गया है? Which of the following provisions of Indian Evidence Act 1872 would cover the Test Identification Parade, also known as TIP, conducted by the police? So TIP falls under which of the following provisions? This is the question. We know that TIP is what? TIP is a process of identification. It is basically a parade, a procedure to identify the accused. Such identification is done by the victim or the witness, but in this, the victim or the witness identifies from among so many persons, similar looking persons having similar physical characteristics. The witness or the victim identifies the accurate accused among them. So we know that it is a test which discloses the identity of the accused, and the facts which discloses the identity of a person are declared to be relevant fact under section 9 of Indian Evidence Act. So TIP is a fact relevant under section 9. So B is the correct answer. So TIP is relevant under section 9, option B. So this is basically verbatim जो section 9 है evidence act का वो दिया गया है. All right, आगे बढ़ेंगे. Question number 12. A lunatic is not incompetent to testify. A lunatic is not incompetent to testify unless he is prevented by his lunacy from understanding the questions put to him and giving rational answers to them. Now basically आपको एक statement यहाँ पे दिया गया है, which is, we know that this is exactly the same statement which has been given in a particular provision of Indian Evidence Act. So you have to identify the provision in which this statement has been given. So we know that section 118 of Evidence Act, which basically tells about the competency of the witnesses, who is competent to become the witness. वहीं पे जब आप सेक्शन 118 में देखते हो तो ल्यूनेटिक की कॉम्पिटेंसी वहां पे स्टेट की गई है. सो दिस स्टेटमेंट इज कवर्ड अंडर 118. सो ऑप्शन ए इज द करेक्ट आंसर. 119 deals with dumb witnesses, 1110 and 1111 deals with the presumptions and burden of proof. All right, option A is the correct answer. इसके explanation देखेंगे तो इसमें section 118 के साथ जो explanation attached है, it clearly states that a lunatic is not incompetent if the following conditions are fulfilled. So this is the same statement which is asked in the question. So 118, option A is the correct answer. Next, again an assertion and proposition question. Assertion. An assertion is given that a barrister, attorney, pleader or vakil can disclose the documents and the communication when they have not been made for the purpose of legal employment. अगर कोई भी communication किसी barrister, pleader, attorney को, if the communication has been made or a document has been given but not in the course of employment, that means there is no confidentiality which is attached to such communication. And when there is no confidentiality attached, that means there is no privilege which is attached. That means they can be disclosed. If any communication is made out of the employment, then it can be disclosed. The disclosure of the documents or communication is restricted only if they are made for the purpose of the professional legal employment. अब हमें यहाँ पे बताना है कि assertion सही है, proposition सही है, दोनों सही है, दोनों गलत है, and what is the relationship between A and P? So both assertion and proposition are correct, and the assertion is the correct explanation of the proposition. Both assertion and the proposition are correct, but the assertion is not the correct explanation of the proposition. Assertion is false, but the proposition is true. The assertion is true, but the proposition is false. अब जब हम इसका आंसर देखते हैं तो आप देखोगे इसका आंसर दिया गया है B. Why? Because both these statements independently are correct. इन दोनों में से कोई भी wrong नहीं है. Independently both these statements are correct because assertion states कि अगर कोई भी document या कोई भी communication legal employment के purpose के लिए नहीं किया गया है, then it is not covered under the privileged communication. And the proposition states that the disclosure of a document or a communication is privileged or is restricted only for the purpose of legal professional employment. So both are correct, but there is no interlinkage between both of them. Both are correct. Both are correct means या तो option A होना चाहिए correct answer and या तो option B होना चाहिए, because both the statements are correct. Because we know that both are correct, but assertion is not the correct explanation of the proposition, because directly indirectly दोनों में same बात बोली गई है. Both assertion and proposition, they are saying the same statement. So assertion is not clearly explaining the proposition here, but independently both are correct. That is why option B is the correct answer here. So इसके explanation में you will be seeing section 26 verbatim यहाँ पे दिया गया है, and इसी से related इसके जो proviso है वो भी आपको दिया गया है. So option B is the correct answer. Okay, now this deals with an accomplice evidence. So an accomplice evidence, क्या बोला गया? An accomplice is a. So you have to answer that whether an accomplice is a competent witness or an incompetent witness. So we all know, as per section 133 of Indian Evidence Act, an accomplice is a competent witness. He or she will be a competent witness. So competent to hoga, yes, but as per section 133, the accomplice will be a competent witness, but he will not be a reliable witness. And we know being a competent witness is one thing and being a reliable witness is another thing. Accomplice is a competent witness but not a reliable. He will not be relied. His testimony will not be relied upon unless it is corroborated by material evidences that is given under section 133. But if we talk about the competency, then definitely as per 133, an accomplice is a competent witness. That means option A is the correct answer here. Now choose the true statements about the proposition. So the proposition is section 6 prescribes the rule of relevancy of an evidence which is a part of same transaction. So part of same transaction, or section 6, also known as the rule of res geste. Section 6 is a manifestation of the rule of res geste. So proposition 1 looks correct. Ki section 6 deals with the facts forming a part of same transaction, also known as res geste. Let's look at the proposition 2. The proximity of time, place and continuity of the actions are suggestive of the part of same transaction. Now basically these are the factors which determine whether a fact will be a part of same transaction or not. So if two facts are connected with each other spontaneously, if two facts are connected with each other naturally or spontaneously, that means one fact is a natural consequence of the other fact. So एक fact दूसरे fact से naturally, spontaneously कैसे connected है? For that purpose, proximity of time, proximity of place, or the continuity of action. Sometimes time or place change हो सकता है, but if the transaction still continues, then even though the time and place and the date and everything has changed, still those facts are a part of same transaction. So these are just the factors to be considered to decide that whether a fact is a part of same transaction or not. So proposition 2 also looks correct. Third, psychological acts may also form a part of same transaction. And as per section 3 of Indian Evidence Act, we know that facts in the Indian Evidence Act includes physical fact as well as psychological fact. All right. So if there is a psychological fact also, and if that psychological fact is connected naturally or spontaneously with the other facts, then that psychological fact may also be a part of the same transaction. So proposition number 3 also looks correct. So the answer should be all are correct. D should be the correct answer. D is the correct answer, and explanation mein it has been mentioned that relevancy of facts forming a part of same transaction. It deals with res geste rule, as I just defined, which states that the facts forming a part of same transaction are relevant, even if they do not involve directly the fact in issue. Basically, these facts are not directly the fact in issue, but they are so connected with the fact in issue that they form a part of the same transaction. All right. For factors to be considered, I just told that proximity of time, place, continuity of actions, these are all the factors to be considered. So these are the factors to be considered, that what will be the part of same transaction. There must be a proximity of time, place, continuity, and a logical connection. As I just mentioned, logical connection should be there, that one fact should be the natural and spontaneous and logical consequence of the other fact. So दोनों में logical connection होना चाहिए. So basically these are the factors. All right. And again, psychological acts, तो इसका तो जो relevance है वो section 3 में ही दिया गया है कि facts forming a part of same transaction, and a fact includes a physical fact as well as a psychological fact. So it is also true. So for that purpose, option D is the correct answer. Next, a will may be proved by. Now this has been given under section 91 of Indian Evidence Act, which talks about the rule of exclusion of oral evidence by documentary evidence. And as per section 91, just have a look at it, as per section 91, exception number 2. All right, as per section 91 exception 2, what has been written, will admitted to probate in India may be proved by the probate. तो will को probate से prove किया जा सकता है. Therefore, the answer is option A. Will may be proved by the probates as per section 91. So, question number 17, which of the following section deals with the number of witnesses under the Indian Evidence Act? So, basically the rule of quality of witnesses and not quantity of witnesses. The rule is that the law prefers the quality of witnesses and not the quantity. So there is no restriction upon ki how many number of witnesses should be there in a case. All right. So there is no limit upon the number of witnesses. And this declaration has been given under section 134 of Indian Evidence Act. So option A is the correct option, because 134 talks about the number of witnesses. That law always favor quality and not quantity. Question number 18, besides the court of small causes. So now we are dealing with, अब हमारा जो Indian Evidence Act वाला segment था, that is also over. Now we are dealing with another law. All right, that is basically the Courts Act. All right, क्या दिया गया है? Besides the court of small causes and the courts established under the other enactment, which of the following classes of subordinate courts shall be in Himachal Pradesh? First is court of district judge, the court of senior civil judge and the court of civil judge. And जब हम classes of court वाला provision पढ़ते हैं इस particular courts act का, in that it has been mentioned that all these classes of courts will be there. So the answer will be 1, 2 and 3. Option D. See, option D is the correct answer as per section 3, which deals with the classes of court, which clearly states that besides the court of small causes and the courts established under any other enactment, the following are the courts which are classes of subordinate courts in the state of Himachal Pradesh. Includes the district judge, senior civil judge and civil judge. So option D, all of the above. Then choose the true statement about the proposition. So the first statement is, under the Himachal Pradesh Courts Act, High Court may, in consultation with the state government, fix the place at which the court is to be held. Second, the place so fixed must always be within the local limits of the jurisdiction of the court. And third, the court under the Himachal Pradesh Courts Act may be held at any place within the local limits of its jurisdiction. So, statement number 2 and 3, they look correct, but we have a doubt in statement number 1. Let's check what is that doubt. So, as we can see that the explanation contains section 15 because section 15 of the act deals with the place of sitting of the court. और वहां पे clearly दिया गया है that the place of sitting may be fixed by the high court only, not in consultation with the state government. जबकि statement number 1 mentions high court with the consultation of the state. That was the doubt in that particular statement. So statement 1 is incorrect, but 2 and 3 are correct as per section 15. So the answer will be option C, that 2 and 3 are correct, 1 is incorrect. Because statement number 1 में in consultation लिखा था, but here it is just the high court which will fix. Other than that, statement 2 exactly वही है जो कि subsection 2 है, statement 3 exactly वही है जो कि subsection 3 है. So basically option C is the correct answer. Next is the state government may from time to time after consultation with the high court fix the number of civil judges to be appointed. This statement is provided under which section of the Himachal Pradesh Courts Act? तो Courts Act का direct question है, section based question. So this statement has been given under section 8 of the Himachal Pradesh Courts Act. So option C is the correct answer. Explanation में section 8 has been given. All right, section 8 deals with that particular statement that the state government after the consultation with the high court will fix that how many number of civil judges to be appointed. So option C, section 8. Question number 21 देखते हैं. Choose the true statement about prepositions. So these are the prepositions again और इसके basis पे हमें true statement देखना है. So the ministerial officers of the district court other than the superintendent of the court shall be appointed by the district judge. The ministerial officers of the civil court under the control of the district judge shall be appointed by the district judge. Then any order passed by the district judge under this section shall be liable to be reversed or modified by the high court, that is the superior court. All these propositions or statements look correct. That is why the answer is option D, that all are correct. क्योंकि बाकी में किसी ना किसी को incorrect बोला गया है. But as we know that section 18 of the Courts Act deals with the provisions regarding the ministerial officers of the court, in which all these three propositions are the subsections of this section 18. For that purpose, all are correct as per section 18 of the Courts Act. D is the correct answer और यहाँ पे आपको section 18 दिया गया है, which contains all the subsections जो कि हमें prepositions दिए गए से. So all are correct. Next is again a very scoring question. This basically these types of match the following के जो questions होते हैं, these are the most scoring ones. क्योंकि यहाँ पे you can directly, even though आपको इनमें से दो पता है, दो नहीं पता है, तो अगर आपको दो पता है, still by making a perfect combination you can easily know the answer, identify the answer. अगर आपको सिर्फ bill of exchange और check का provision पता है कि stamp act के कौन से provision में bill of exchange और check को define किया गया है, but अगर आपको बाकी के दो नहीं पता है, but अगर आप series match कर लें तो you can correctly identify the answer. That is why the match the following questions are very scoring. So let's just see, we have to identify as to bill of exchange को कहाँ define किया गया है, check को कहाँ define किया गया है, duly stamped and lease को कहाँ define किया गया है under the Stamp Act. And these provisions, section 2, clause 2, section 2, clause 6, section 2, 16, clause, section 2, clause 11 and section 2, clause 7. So we have to match and make the combinations. So accordingly, when we match these according to the provision numbers of that act, option D is the correct option. Option D का मतलब है 1432, bill of exchange, that is defined under 2 clause 2, check which is defined under section 2 clause 7, duly stamped which is defined under section 2 clause 11, and lease which is defined under section 2 clause 16. Now let's just have a glance over the definitions. Bill of exchange की जो definition है, that means in Stamp Act also they have made a declaration that bill of exchange की definition होगी the same bill of exchange which has been defined under the Negotiable Instruments Act, which means basically a promise to the order to pay. Bill of exchange is an order to pay, so it has the same definition which is there in the Negotiable Instruments Act. All right, जहां पे एक drawer होता है, एक drawee होता है, the drawer draws a bill upon the drawee, which is basically an order to pay. Similarly, check को भी define किया गया है. Check is also a type of bill of exchange. Check is also a type of bill of exchange which is drawn upon the banker. So यहाँ पे the normal bill of exchange में the bill is drawn upon the person. But in check, check is a special type of bill of exchange where the check is drawn upon a particular banker, a specified banker, and it is not payable and it is not expressed to be payable otherwise than on demand. So basically these are the definitions of bill of exchange and check. Duly stamped. Duly stamped means that instrument bears an adhesive or impress. So basically stamp act जब आप पढ़ते हो, stamp act deals with two types of stamps, adhesive stamps and impressed stamps. So कोई भी ऐसा instrument जिसपे या तो adhesive stamp लगा है या फिर impress stamp लगा है of a proper amount, of an amount which is proper amount. So if that instrument is stamped either by an adhesive stamp or by an impress stamp of a proper amount, for a proper amount, that means that instrument is duly stamped. Next is lease. अब lease की जो definition 2 clause 16 में दी गई है, that is not a clear definition. It is basically again an inclusive definition. यहाँ पे lease को define नहीं किया गया है, rather it has mentioned that the lease includes, all right, lease of immovable property which is defined under TPA. So the lease of immovable property or the lease, the concept of lease is dealt under TPA, Transfer of Property Act. But here an inclusive definition is given that it includes a patta, a qubuliyat or other undertaking in writing, not being a counterpart of the lease to cultivate, occupy or pay or deliver rent for immovable property. See, any instrument by which tolls of any description are let, any writing on an application for a lease intended to signify that the application is granted. So D is the correct answer जो हमने match किया according to the combinations. Next, again Stamp Act question. Under Indian Stamp Act, no duty shall be chargeable on any instrument for dash, comma, transfer or the other disposition of any ship or vessel registered under the Merchants Shipping Act. So यहाँ पे we have to fill in the blank. यहाँ पे dash की जगह आएगा the term sale. All right, so the section is under the Indian Stamp Act, no duty shall be chargeable on any instrument for the sale, transfer or disposition of any ship or vessel under the Merchant Shipping Act. So the यहाँ पे आएगा the answer is sale. So option B. And this is dealt under section 3 which talks about the instruments which are chargeable with stamp duty. जब आप इसका proviso देखते हो, section 3 का जब आप proviso देखते हो, so proviso में the proviso number 2 of section 3 deals with the duty upon the ship or vessel. All right, the duty upon the transfer or sale or disposition of ship or vessel under the Merchant Shipping Act, which is exempted under section 3. So proviso 2 के अंदर ये बात बोली गई है. So option B, that is sale, is the correct answer. Next is which of the following section of the Himachal Pradesh Stamp Amendment Act. अब यहाँ पे हमने State Amendment, Stamp Act में जो हिमाचल प्रदेश का State Amendment है उस पे क्वेश्चन पूछा गया है that which section of the Himachal Pradesh Stamp State Amendment Act 1952 deals with the payment of Himachal Pradesh stamp duty on copies, counterparts, duplicates when that duty has not been paid on the principal or original instrument. So this is also a direct question, but this is a question from the State Amendment. Generally what we do in any BER Act or in any law, we skip the State Amendments. But you should, as a matter of precaution, even though these questions are very rarely asked, but ऐसे क्वेश्चंस अगर पूछे गए, then it will be the most tricky question, because again when you are going to appear for a state, so you should know the relevant state amendments. जो state के relevant laws में जो भी state amendments हैं आपको उनके बारे में पता होना चाहिए. So when you read any law, just go through the state amendment of that particular state for which you are going to appear. So for that purpose, here we have one of a kind of question from the state amendment also, so that you aspirants, you all aspirants, you should know that you have to go through the state amendments also. So here the answer is option C. Section 6 capital A of the State Amendment Act deals with this provision. So section 6 capital A, option C is the correct answer. And in the explanation, we have given section 6 capital A of the Amendment Act. Next is question number 25. Again, under the Indian Stamp Act of 1899, all instruments chargeable with duty and executed by any person in India shall be stamped. Now, this is one of the most important sections of the Stamp Act. Whenever you make a list of the important sections in the Stamp Act, section 617 is one of the most important provisions. Because वहां पे बताया गया है कि कब वो stamping, so basically the instruments chargeable with duty and executed by a person shall be stamped. तो कब stamped होना चाहिए? Is it before the execution? Is it after the execution? Or is it at the time of execution? So section 17 clearly states that either before the execution or at the time of execution, the instrument shall be stamped. So the answer will be A and B both. That is option C. And that has been given under section 17. अगर आप देखोगे, all instruments chargeable with duty and executed by any person in India shall be stamped before or at the time of the execution. So option C, section 17 of Stamp Act. Question number 26. Now from here we are starting with another segment which is basically Specific Relief Act. अब हम बात करेंगे Specific Relief Act के कुछ questions की. So basically here this is basically one of the most important question again, because this question also deals with a topic which is one of the most important topic in SRA, Specific Relief Act. That is basically it talks about the remedy or relief of the recovery of possession of the property in cases of dispossession. यहाँ पे बोला गया है that what recourse means the relief, what relief is available to a person if he is dispossessed without his consent of an immovable property, otherwise then in due course of law. So this correct language, exact language has been used in section 6 of SRA, which clearly states that when a person is dispossessed from an immovable property, otherwise then under a due course of law, then such a person is entitled to a relief of recovery of possession of the immovable property. Accordingly, इसमें options देखते हैं और उसमें से correct option choose करते हैं. So the first recourse given in option A is he may by a criminal suit. So यहीं पे इसकी गलती पकड़ी गई. Criminal suit, there is no recourse of a criminal suit because we are talking about section 6 of SRA. So criminal proceeding का तो कोई चांस ही नहीं है. So criminal suit, this term in itself is wrong. कभी भी आप एक सिविल सूट को क्रिमिनल नहीं बोल सकते. तो क्रिमिनल सूट recover possession thereof notwithstanding any other title that may be set up in such suit. Wrong. B, he or any person through whom he has been put in possession or any person claiming through him may by suit recover the possession thereof notwithstanding any other title that may be set up. This is the correct answer because section 6 की exact language यहाँ पे option B में दी गई है. But still, let's read option C and D also. He may by mortgage suit recover the possession thereof notwithstanding any other title that may be set up. There is no question of filing a mortgage suit here because this concept is about recovery of possession. There is no question of mortgage. Or he may by a money suit recover the possession. So the possession can never be recovered by a money suit. So the correct option or answer as per section 6 of SRA is option B, which is exactly given under section 6 of SRA. All right. So 6 subsection 1 यहाँ पे दिया गया है जहाँ पे exact same language use हुई है. So option B is the correct answer. A dash injunction can only be granted by the decree made at the hearing and upon the merits of the suit. The defendant is thereby perpetually enjoined. Perpetually enjoined means permanently restricted. Perpetually enjoined from the assertion of a right or from the commission of an act, which could be contrary to the right of the plaintiff. तो यहाँ पे fill in the blanks करना है हमें. That means we have to choose कि यहाँ पे कौन से injunction की बात की गई है. In which injunction you can perpetually enjoin or permanently restrict the defendant from committing an act against the right of the plaintiff. So जब हम permanent की बात करते हैं, we know that we are talking about the perpetual injunction and not the temporary injunction. So perpetually means permanently. That means we are talking about perpetual injunction. So the answer is option A, perpetual injunction, which is defined under section 37 of SRA. So there is a difference between perpetual injunction and temporary injunction. Perpetual injunction, which is basically by way of a decree, which is given, the relief of perpetual injunction is given by way of a decree, which means permanently restraining the defendant from committing breach of obligation towards the plaintiff. Whereas temporary injunction means a temporary order in the form of an order which temporarily restrains the defendant or a person from doing an act. Temporary injunction is defined under section 37 SRA, but it is dealt under order 39 of CPC. But perpetual injunction is defined in SRA and it is dealt under SRA only. So यहाँ पे the answer is option A, perpetual injunction. An explanation में again, as I mentioned, section 37 has been mentioned here, which defines both temporary and perpetual injunctions. So option A is the correct answer. Next, no substituted performance. Now this relief of substituted performance was not there in SRA from before. It was added by way of an amendment in 2018. It is one of the most important amendment in the history of Specific Relief Act because it basically has changed the nature of the specific performance of the contract. The specific performance of the contract, which was earlier to 2018 amendment, it was a discretionary relief. But now, after the 2018 amendment, specific performance of a contract is now a mandatory relief if the conditions are fulfilled. Then there is no discretion. Also, 2018 amendment say a new relief was also added, which is known as the relief of substituted performance. That when basically one of the party to the contract commits a breach of the contract. So the party who is aggrieved by such breach, that party can also avail the relief of substituted performance. Specific performance का आपके पास है ही एक option कि आप उसी party से जिसने breach किया है उससे specifically perform कराओ, या फिर you can also get the contract performed by some other person or some other agency. This is known as substituted performance of contract, which is now given under section 20 of the SR. So basically this is by way of amendment of 2018. उसी से related ये question है. No substituted performance of a contract shall be undertaken unless the party who suffers, that means the aggrieved party, aggrieved party from such breach has given a notice in writing of not less than dash. तो हमें बताना है कितने दिन का notice देना होता है, dash, to the party in breach, that means party at fault, calling upon him to perform the contract within such time as specified in the notice, and on his refusal or failure, he may get the same performed by the third party or from his own agency. That means substituted performance. So, कितने दिन का notice aggrieved party को देना होता है to the party at fault? So, the correct answer here is option B. 30 days का notice देना होता है. It has been mentioned Under section 20, as I just mentioned, section 20 deals with substituted performance, and section 20 subsection 2 says that a 30 days notice is required to be given by the aggrieved party to the party at fault. So whenever after giving such notice, still the party at fault fails to perform the contract, then the aggrieved party can get it substitutedly performed by someone else. So answer will be option B, 30 days notice. Question 29 देखते हैं. According to the Specific Relief Act of 1963, where a party to a contract is unable to perform the whole of his part of it. Now we know that this talks about the concept of part performance, and part performance has been dealt under section 12 of Specific Relief Act. कि जहां पे the party cannot perform the whole of it, the entire contract cannot be performed, the contract can be performed in part. All right, cannot perform the whole of his part, but the part which must be left unperformed, it is a small proportion of the whole. So basically a small portion of the entire contract cannot be performed, and that portion, that small portion which cannot be performed, it admits of compensation. Admits of compensation means for that small unperformed portion, compensation can be given. Then the court may direct the specific performance of so much of the contract. That means the part performance grant kiya jayega, but it will be granted at the suit of A, either party, B, the party at default, C, the party not at default, D, none of the above. So as per section 12 of SRA, subsection 2, we know that it can be done, part performance can be done at the suit of either party. So option A is the correct answer. Option A, section 12 subsection 2 क्या दिया गया है? Where a party to a contract is unable to perform the whole of it, but the part which must be left unperformed, only a small portion of the whole in value, and admits of compensation. Then the court may at the suit of either party, direct the specific performance of so much of the contract as can be performed and award compensation for the deficiency. So basically option A is the correct answer, either party. Question number 30 also deals with SRA, and it deals with section 34, which deals with the relief of declaratory decree. Section 34 के अंदर a declaration may be sought by. So now they are asking that under section 34, the relief of declaratory decree can be claimed by whom? A person having a legal character, B, only a declaration of legal character, C, only a declaration of right to property, या D, a declaration of legal character or of a right to property. So as we know that section 34 expressly mentions that in declaratory decree, a declaration as to a legal character and a declaration as to the right to the property both can be claimed. So the answer will be D, either a declaration of legal character or a declaration of right to property. और ये clearly जब आप section 34 देखते हो, it clearly states, इसके starting में देखेंगे, any person entitled to a legal character or any right as to any property may institute a suit against any person denying or interested to deny his title to such character or right, and the court may in its discretion make a declaration therein that he is so entitled, and the plaintiff need not in such suit ask for any further relief. So under section 34, the declaratory decree can be claimed for both, for declaration as to a legal character, that I am entitled to a legal character, or for declaration as to a right to property, that I am entitled to have a particular right in the property. दोनों का declaration we can claim under section 34. So the option will be option D, both. Question number 31. Now from here we are starting with another segment which is basically related with the Indian Contract Act. यहाँ से हम Indian Contract Act का segment start करेंगे. Let's see. Question number 31, the contract of insurance, the performance of which depend upon the future event falls under the category of contract. So हमें बताना है contract of insurance, इनमें से कौन से category of type of contract में fall होगा. First is wagering contract, second is quasi contract, third is contingent contract, and D, fourth is future contract. And as we all know that a contract of insurance, because the contract of insurance is based upon the performance of basically a future event. Basically, contract of insurance is based upon the happening or non-happening of a future event. And as per section 31 of Indian Contract Act, we know that the contract, the performance of which is dependent upon either the happening or the non-happening of a future event attached to such contract, then such a contract falls in the category of contingent contract. उनको बोला जाता है contingent contract. कोई भी कॉन्ट्रैक्ट जिसका परफॉर्मेंस किसी फ्यूचर इवेंट के हैपनिंग या नॉन हैपनिंग पे डिपेंडेंट होता है, इट इज नोन एज अ कंटिंजेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट. अ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट कंटिंजेंट अपॉन अ फ्यूचर इवेंट. सो द आंसर हियर विल बी सी, कंटिंजेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट. वेजरिंग नहीं हो सकता बिकॉज वेजरिंग में भी, इवन दो वेजरिंग में भी the contract is dependent upon the enforcement of the contract, or basically the performance of the contract is dependent upon a future event. But in wagering contract, there are mutual chances of winning and losing of both the parties. So basically, wagering में, for example, a bet. So दोनों parties के 50-50 chances. So wagering में there is a mutual chances of winning and losing. Quasi contract is basically a partial contract, which creates a contract like obligation, but there is no formal agreement. Future contract means a contract which is to be conducted or which is to happen in future. The contract in itself will happen in future. In contingent contract, the contract is there in the present, but the contract will be performed only when the future event happens or it does not happen. So contract of insurance is a clear example of contingent contract. So option C is the correct option as per section 31 of Indian Contract Act. Question number 32 पे आएंगे. Which of the following agreements is or are void under the Indian Contract Act? Option A, agreements without consideration. So we know as per section 25 of Indian Contract Act, an agreement without consideration are void. तो ये तो void होंगे. आगे क्या दिया है? And agreement in restraint of legal proceeding only. As per section 28, we know that the agreements which are in restraint of legal proceeding, which put a bar upon the legal proceeding or the enforcement of a legal right, these contracts are also void agreements. Basically, they are not contracts, they are void agreement. So any agreement without consideration is void agreement, and any agreement in restraint of legal proceeding is a void agreement as per section 25 and section 28 respectively. तो option A तो बिल्कुल correct है. Option B देख लेते हैं. Agreement without consideration section 25, agreement in restraint of legal proceeding void होते हैं under section 28 as option A में भी दिया गया है. इसमें कुछ additional भी है, that is an agreement effected by fraud. Now here we clearly know that an agreement or a contract which is basically executed or which is basically effected by way of fraud. So as per section 19 of the Indian Contract Act, such contract or such agreements are not void, rather they are voidable contracts. तो वो void नहीं होंगे, तो option B is not correct. All right. Option C, agreement effected by fraud. By fraud, they cannot be void because they are always voidable contract. Agreement in restraint of legal proceeding only. ये void होते हैं, but option A is the more comprehensive and appropriate option because इसमें दोनों ही agreements void होंगे. Section 25, Section 28. So option A is the correct answer. And इसकी explanation में भी it has been written Section 25 and 28. Question number 23, the principle of force majeure. The principle of force majeure emanates from which provision of the Indian Contract Act? Force majeure means something which is dependent upon impossibility or something which is dependent upon future happening. All right, कोई ऐसी situation, force majeure is something basically which is outside the control of the human agency, which is outside or beyond the control of human. So basically something out of control, an event which is beyond the control is force majeure. And we clearly know जिसको हम impossibility भी बोलते हैं, which has been dealt under section 56 because section 56 talks about frustration of contract. All right, and section 56 includes initial impossibility as well as subsequent impossibility, which is also an element of force majeure. A situation, impossible situation भी क्या होती है? Impossible situation is also a condition beyond the control. Force majeure. So option C is the correct answer. Section 56 of Indian Contract Act. So option C. इसके explanation में we have given section 56, and other than that, the principle of force majeure has also been given. Let's read it. Force majeure clauses often included in contract enumerate specific events such as natural disaster. Basically, it contains all those events which are beyond the control. For example, the natural disasters, for example, wars, for example, the government actions, all right, that excuse non-performance under certain circumstances. Second statement is, while the force majeure clauses typically require the events to be foreseeable and explicitly listed, the doctrine of frustration encompasses unforeseeable events not covered by such clauses. So basically, the essence of force majeure is seen in section 56 impossibility. But there is a difference between force majeure and impossibility. The difference has been given in point number 2. Point number 3, Indian courts have recognized force majeure as a potential ground for frustration. That frustration, that is section 56, is an essence or an element of force majeure, especially when the contractual terms do not explicitly address unforeseen events. So accordingly, option C is the correct answer, section 56. Question number 34 देखते हैं. The principle of anticipatory breach of contract. Now this is also a direct question कि anticipatory breach of contract कहाँ, कौन से section of Indian Contract Act में दिया गया है? So the correct answer here is section 39, option D. So breach of contract means when either of the party to the contract violates the terms of the contract or does not perform the contract. It is known as breach of contract. अब breach दो तरीके के होते हैं. First one is actual breach and the second one is anticipatory breach. When at the time of the performance of the contract, stipulated time of performance पे जब किस कोई भी एक party breach commit करती है, then that breach is known as the actual breach. But when either of the party before the actual stipulated time either refuses to perform or fails to perform, then such a breach is known as anticipatory breach, which is given under section 39 of Indian Contract Act. So option D is the correct answer. Explanation देखेंगे आप इसका, तो section 39 has been explained, then the actual breach has been explained that I just mentioned, and then section 39 verbatim पूरा provision यहाँ दिया गया. Accordingly, option D is the correct answer. Okay, section 35, again a kind of tricky question, because we always read about quasi-contracts being one of the most important topic for your exam. And the concept of quasi-contract has been given under section 68 to section 72 of the Indian Contract Act. But ये question में क्या बोला गया है? The term quasi-contract is used in which provision? कि ये term quasi-contract इनमें से किस provision में use की गई है? So it is a tricky question because in actual circumstance, this term quasi-contract has not been used in the entire act. This term quasi-contract is an English law principle. It is a principle based upon English law which was introduced by Lord Mansfield. But ये टर्म एक्सप्रेसली कहीं यूज नहीं हुई है. द टर्म दैट वी हैव यूज्ड फॉर डिफाइनिंग क्वासी कॉन्ट्रैक्ट इज द ऑब्लिगेशन रिजेंबलिंग दैट ऑफ द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट. हमने उसको एक रिजेंबलिंग नेचर की ऑब्लिगेशन, which is an obligation. The obligation created under quasi-contract is an obligation which resembles the obligation which is created under an ordinary contract. But the term quasi-contract has not been used anywhere. So it has not been used in section 70, 69 or 68. Even though 68, 69, 70 ये तीनों ही quasi-contract के chapter के अंदर आते हैं. But the terminology which is used is obligations resembling contract and not quasi-contract. So the answer will be D, none of the above. Quasi-contract means a contractual obligation, basically a contract-like obligation without an express or without a formal contract. That the parties has not entered into a formal contract, but by the facts and circumstances, an obligation has arose, and such an obligation, it resembles the contractual obligation. So those resembling nature obligations are known as quasi-contracts, which are dealt from section 68 to section 72 of Indian Contract Act. So the answer will be D. Explanation में the nature of quasi-contract, as I just explained, वही दिया गया है. And other than that, the concept of quasi-contract, जैसे मैंने अभी बोला, that it is an English law concept. It was considered by Lord Mansfield. All right. So option D is the correct answer. That it is nowhere named. All right. Now again, we have to match the followings according to the provisions and the concepts of Indian Contract Act. So इसको हमें combination बनाना है. Very easy. Mistake of law. We all know mistake of law has been given under section 21 of Indian Contract Act, which says कि mistake of law, अगर mistake of Indian law है, then it is not voidable. Then the contract is not voidable. That means it's valid. Mistake of law is not an excuse. But if the mistake is regarding a foreign law, then the mistake of foreign law is treated exactly like the mistake of fact. यूनिलैटरल, बायलैटरल, उसको वैसे ही ट्रीट किया जाता है जैसे मिस्टेक ऑफ फैक्ट को डील किया जाता है. एंड दैट हैज बीन गिवन अंडर सेक्शन 21. सो ए का होगा 2. कंसेंट हैज बीन डिफाइंड अंडर सेक्शन 13, which means agreeing upon the same thing in the same sense, also known as consensus ad idem. Undue influence has been dealt under section 16 and coercion has been dealt under section 15. Undue influence means when any person is in a dominant position and that person uses the dominant position to obtain an undue advantage over the other who is in a suppressive position or a submissive position. So usko bola jata hai undue influence. Coercion means a kind of threatening. When a person is basically entering into a contract not by the free consent but under a threatening, all right, under a fear, then it is known as the effect of coercion. So the correct combination will be 2, 1, 4, 3. 2, 1, 4, 3. अब देखते हैं 2, 1, 4, 3 कहां दिया गया है? ऑप्शन डी में 2, 1, 4, 3. और एक्सप्लेनेशन में सारे के सारे डेफिनेशंस, सेक्शन 13 की कंसेंट की डेफिनेशन, सेक्शन 21 में मिस्टेक ऑफ लॉ के बारे में, इंडियन लॉ एंड फॉरेन लॉ, सेक्शन 15 में कोअर्जन के बारे में, सेक्शन 16 में अनड्यू इन्फ्लुएंस के बारे में. ऑप्शन डी इज द करेक्ट कॉम्बिनेशन. क्वेश्चन नंबर 37. Who can file an application under section 24 of Hindu Marriage Act? Now we are talking about the Hindu law here. हम यहाँ पे हिंदू लॉ की बात कर रहे हैं. हिंदू लॉ में से typically we are here talking about the Hindu Marriage Act. Section 24 of HMA, Hindu Marriage Act, which deals with the maintenance pendente light. So the question is कि under section 24, who can file an application for claiming the maintenance? So the answer here is A, either husband or wife. क्योंकि only husband नहीं होगा, LRs of the husband नहीं होगा, only wife भी नहीं होगा. Both, either the husband or the wife. Whoever is in the need, that person can file a petition and can claim the maintenance from the respondent. And such a maintenance has been dealt under section 24 of Hindu Marriage Act. So basically this is the provision of section 24 Hindu Marriage Act, जहां पे दिया गया है clearly either the wife or the husband. So the answer will be option A. Now question 38, which talks about the void marriages. So the void marriages have been described under. Direct question hai, the answer will be option number D, that is section 11. Section 11 of HMA deals with void marriages, और section 11 में declare किया गया है that a marriage which is basically in contravention of subclause 1, subclause 4 and subclause 5 of section 5 of Hindu Marriage Act. Section 5 which talks about the conditions, essential conditions of a valid marriage. So जो भी marriage essential condition 1, essential condition 4 and essential condition 5 के contravention में enter की जाती है, that marriage is a void marriage and it can be declared to be a nullity by obtaining a decree as per section 11 of Hindu Marriage Act. So option D is the correct answer here. All right. See explanation में as it is section 11 आपको दिया गया है and option D is the correct answer. Direct question. Question number 39. Let's see question number 39, what it has to say. Section 12, clause 1, subclause A of Hindu Marriage Act is related to. So again, it is a direct question. Section 12, which deals with voidable marriages. वहां पे जो subsection 1 clause A है, it deals with the marriage has not been consummated owing to an impotency of the respondent. So वहां पे the ground of impotency has been dealt. So the correct answer will be option A. This is a direct question and explanation में we have given exactly वही. Section 12, subsection 1, clause A, which deals with the ground of impotency here. So option A is the correct answer. Question number 40. Which among the following is not a ground for divorce under the Hindu Marriage Act? So हमें यहाँ पे see whenever अब ये this is a perfect example of what I am going to explain right now. So whenever you are preparing for prelims, you have to ensure that you have to focus on the Bail Act. जो Bail Act में expressly दिया गया है, you have to answer the MCQ accordingly. You have to choose that option which is perfectly fit according to the express language of the Bail Act. अब यहाँ पे बोला गया है कौन सा ground नहीं है. And we know that grounds of divorce under HMA has been dealt under section 13. So section 13 of Hindu Marriage Act में कुछ grounds दिए गए. So इनमें से कौन सा ground expressly section 13 में नहीं दिया गया है वो हमें mark करना है. Unsoundness of mind, it's there as a ground. Desertion is also there as a ground. Irretrievable breakdown of marriage is not a ground as per section 13. I'm not saying that this is not a valid ground or this is not a valid concept under the Hindu Marriage Act. Irretrievable breakdown of marriage is a concept of breakdown of marriage, but it is not expressly declared as a ground of divorce under section 13 of HMA. All right. And cruelty is also an express ground. तो क्योंकि option C express ground नहीं है, even though it is a good concept, it is a valid concept of Hindu Marriage Act, but because out of all of them, this option C is not an express ground of section 13, hence option C is the correct answer. But irretrievable breakdown of marriage is basically, अब देखो यहाँ पे आपको पूरा section 13 दिया गया है and IRB की थ्योरी भी दी गई है. Irretrievable breakdown of marriage is basically a breakdown of marriage when the husband and the wife, that means the spouses, they fail to reconcile. That means there is no probability that there will be a reconciliation between both of them. It is known as irretrievable breakdown of marriage. Irretrievable means something which cannot be repaired. Irreparable breakdown, the marriage has been broken down irreparably. All right. वो भी breakdown of marriage है, but that is not an express ground of divorce under section 13. Therefore, Option C is the correct answer. That is the theory of IRB. It has not been expressly given under the Hindu Marriage Act, but this theory was propounded and has been considered by various Supreme Court judgments. All right. So this is about IRB. Okay. Which one of the following is not class 2 heir according to Hindu Succession Act? Now we all know that Hindu Succession Act में class 1 heirs में कौन आएगा, class 2 heirs में कौन आएगा, etc. It has been dealt not in the provisions but in the schedule which is attached to Hindu Succession Act. So this question is from the schedule. So from this question now we come to know that not just the provisions of Hindu Succession Act, we also have to go through the schedule which is attached to the Hindu Succession Act because they can ask questions from the schedule itself. यहाँ पे बोला गया है कौन class 2 heirs नहीं है. So the answer is option C, that is brother sister by uterine blood, because in that schedule father class 2 heir में आते हैं, father's father, father's mother ये भी class 2 heir में आते हैं, mother's father, mother's mother ये भी class 2 heir में आते हैं, but brother and sister by uterine blood they are not covered under the class 2 heirs as per the schedule. And here is the schedule of class 2 heirs jahan pe we can find brother and sister but we cannot find brother and sister by uterine blood. That is why it is not there in the class 2 heirs ki list. So the answer will be option C here. It is as per the schedule, not as per any section. So question number 42 deals with again Hindu law, that is Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act. All right. So under the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act, the mother has the capacity to give child in adoption if the father of the child. So mother की जो adoption में किसी भी अपने child को adoption में देने की जो capacity है, it depends upon the incapacity of the father. So, what is that incapacity of the father upon which the capacity of the mother is dependent? That the mother will be competent to give in adoption when the father is either dead or has ceased to be a Hindu or has finally and completely renounced the world or all of the above. So, as we know under section 9 of the Hindu Adoption and Maintenance Act, jahan pe the persons who are competent or capable of giving an adoption has been given कि कौन-कौन adoption में दे सकता है वो दिया गया है section 9 में, and as per section 9 all these are the grounds. So option D, all of the above is the correct answer. section 9 में जब आप section 9 का proviso देखते हो, so यहाँ पे दिया गया है basically section 9 subsection 1 और 2 में दिया है both the father and the mother they will have an equal right of giving an adoption. बट अगर मदर को एक अडॉप्शन में देना है चाइल्ड, सो द मदर हैज टू टेक द कंसेंट ऑफ द फादर, बट द कंसेंट विल नॉट बी रिक्वायर्ड इफ द फादर इज ईदर डेड और रिनाउंस द वर्ल्ड और सीज टू बी अ हिंदू. सो फ्रॉम दैट दिस क्वेश्चन हैज बीन आस्क्ड. सो अकॉर्डिंगली द आंसर इज ऑल ऑफ द अबव, ऑप्शन डी. क्वेश्चन नंबर 43 देखेंगे. Under the Hindu Minority Guardianship Act 1956, custody of a minor who has not completed the age of dash shall ordinarily be with the mother. कितने years तक के age के child की custody ordinarily mother के पास होगी? So the answer is option C, 5 years. Because under the Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act section 6, which deals with the natural guardian of a child, it has been clearly mentioned that the custody of a boy, अब जब आप section 6 का clause A देखते हो वहां पे बात की गई है custody of a child की who is either a boy or an unmarried girl. All right, the custody it is with the father and after him the mother. But the proviso to clause A states that the custody of a minor, that means a child who has not completed the age of 5 years shall ordinarily be with the mother. So 5 years tak ke age ke child ki ordinarily the custody will lie with the mother. So here the answer is 5 years. So option C is the correct answer, which is given under section 6 of HMGA, Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act. Next, question number 44. Let's see question 44 में क्या दिया गया है. According to the Limitation Act. Now again, another segment has started, which is basically the Limitation Act. So according to Limitation Act, which of the following statements accurately defines the term minor? Now we all know, as per the definition clause of Limitation Act, the term minor has not been actually defined. Because minor means a person who has not attained majority as per the Indian Majority Act. लेकिन जब हम देखते हैं सेक्शन 6 ऑफ लिमिटेशन एक्ट, जहां पे माइनॉरिटी हैज बीन गिवन एज अ काइंड ऑफ लीगल डिसेबिलिटी, and in the explanation of section 6 it has been mentioned that the term minor here includes a child in the womb. So ये दिया गया है लिमिटेशन एक्ट के सेक्शन 6 में. So option A is the correct answer. All right, so option A is the correct answer, that minor includes a child in the mother's womb. And इसका explanation देखते हैं. Again, section 6, I just spoke about legal disability, and the explanation which is attached to section 6, it states that minor includes the child in the womb. That is why option A is the correct answer. Question number 45. According to section 4, which is one of the exception to the general rule, section 3 of the Limitation Act deals with the general rule that the suits, appeals or applications which are basically barred by limitation, they shall not be allowed. So whenever a suit, appeal or application is filed, made or preferred beyond the prescribed period, then they will not be allowed. उसको बोला जाएगा that they are barred by limitation. But उसका एक exception section 4 of Limitation Act में दिया गया है. That means when the prescribed period for a suit, appeal or application expires on a day when the court is closed. When as per the prescribed period which is given in the Limitation Act, such prescribed period for that suit, appeal or application, it expires or it ends on a day जिस दिन पे कोर्ट ही क्लोज थी. That means filing of a suit, appeal or application was beyond the control of that particular plaintiff or applicant or petitioner or appellant here. That means it is an exception to the general rule कि उस दिन अगर कोर्ट बंद है तो situation में the period of limitation is supposed to expire on the day, or the suit, appeal or application can be filed, made or preferred on the day when the court reopens. This has been given under section 4. According to this, let's see. A, the suit, appeal or application may not be instituted after the expiry. ये तो general rule है section 3 का, ये तो हम exception की बात कर रहे हैं. तो option A is incorrect. Option B, the suit, appeal or application may be instituted on the next available working day. That is not the language which is used in section 4. Next option देखेंगे. Suit, appeal or application may be instituted on the day when the court reopens. This is exactly the same language which is used in section 4. And I just told you, you have to go with the language which is used in the Bail Act whenever you are appearing for prelims examination. So option C is the correct option. Option D भी एक बार देख लेते हैं. The suit, appeal or application may be instituted within 30 days of the expiry. This is no rule given under section 4. The correct option is option C as per section 4. So section 4 verbatim has been given here, according to which option C is the correct answer. Next देखते हैं question number 46. What is the period of limitation prescribed for arrears of rent? So this question is again not from any substantive provision of the Limitation Act. Rather, this question is from the schedule which is attached to the Limitation Act, which provides for the period of limitation for different cause of actions. तो इसी में cause of action अगर arrears of rent का है तो उसके लिए the period of limitation given in the schedule is option D, 3 years. All right, and it has been given under Article 52 of the Schedule of Limitation Act. Next is again a question from the schedule for limitation period. What is the limitation period prescribed by the landlord to recover the possession from a tenant? So, for recovery of possession of immovable property from a tenant, what is the period of limitation which is provided in the schedule? So, the answer here is option B, 12 years. And this has been given under Article 7 of the schedule attached to the Limitation Act. Direct question from the schedule. Now, we are talking about the segment of TPA. अब यहाँ से question number 48 से हमारा TPA का segment start हो रहा है, that is Transfer of Property Act. And again we have a match the following question. So let's now start with the matching. The condition restraining alienation. So we know that a condition which restrains alienation of the property, that means disposal of the property, a free flow of the property. So a condition which restrains the alienation of the property or the disposal of the property, it is given under section 10 of TPA. So A का तो होगा 2. Then agreement to sell. We are not talking about the contract of sale here. We are talking about the agreement to sell. That means agreement आज किया है, and this agreement contains the terms and conditions on the basis of which the future sale will be done. That means agreement to sell. And agreement to sell is basically it creates an interest. But the interest which is created is only a right in personam. That means this right is only enforced or executed. It is only against the other party to such agreement. तो अगर buyer और seller ने एक agreement to sell किया, so the buyer will be having the right against the seller and the seller will be having the right only against the buyer. That means rights in person. So agreement to sell का होगा 3. Right in personam. Sale. जब agreement to sell के बाद finally an actual sale is done. That means a property का right of ownership it has come to the buyer. And whenever आपको किसी property का ownership मिलता है, so that right is not only against the seller, but now for the entire world you are the owner of this property. So this is a right not in personam but a right in rem. तो C का होगा right in rem, that is 1. And fraudulent transfer, which is a transfer with the intention to defeat the interest of the creditor. So fraudulent transfer has been given under section 53. So the correct combination is A ka 2, then agreement to sell is 3, sale is 1, fraudulent transfer is 4. So 2, 3, 1, 4. So the correct option is C, 2, 3, 1, 4. So option is C. An explanation में आपको सारा explanation दिया गया है that I just explained. All right. Restraining alienation, agreement to sell is a right in personam, sale is a right in rem, and fraudulent transfer has been given in section 53. Option C is the correct answer. Question number 49 देखते हैं, talks about section 6. Section 6 is again one of the most important topics of Transfer of Property Act because it deals with those types of rights in the property which cannot be transferred under TPA. So what cannot be transferred? All right. So section 6 of TPA provides that the property of any kind may be transferred except the following. So हमें बताना है कि इनमें से कौन सा correct है. First is a mere right to sue. We all know that as per section 6, a mere right to sue cannot be transferred. All right, because it is a right which is a personal kind of right, a personal natured right. So it cannot be transferred. All right, because right to sue. See, basically what happens, right to sue is directly related with the cause of action. The person who has a cause of action has a right to sue. So that right to sue is personally belonging to that person. It cannot be transferred to any other person. So 1 is correct. Second, the public office or the salary of a public officer. So for the purpose of public interest, किसी भी public office को या public office से attached किसी salary of a public officer को, this cannot be transferred because this is again dependent upon the skill, personal skills of a person, and in the interest of public, it is required that this should not be transferred. So point number 2 is also correct. The chance of an heir apparent succeeding to an interest, which is also known as the rule of spec successionis. Spec successionis, that means a speculative succession. That means a chance of a person being a successor. All right, so I have a chance to become the successor. So a mere chance to become a successor in the property cannot transferred. All right, so third is also correct. An easement apart from the dominant heritage. So कोई भी easementary right apart from, that means other than the dominant heritage, apart from dominant heritage के अलावा, dominant heritage के बिना. Now here the dominant heritage means basically whenever we talk about the term easement. So the easement, whenever the easementary right is attached to the property. So I have a right to way and I use that right to way because I want to reach a particular property. So the property to which the right to way is attached, that right to way cannot be transferred apart from that particular property to which the right to way is attached. The right to way is only transferred along with that particular property. जब आप उस property को sell करोगे, उससे attached right to way automatically transfer होगा. But we cannot do that we are transferring only the right to way apart from the dominant heritage, that is the property, main property. That cannot be done. So this is also correct. Accordingly, all basically, all right, all are correct. All right. So इन मतलब all are correct का क्या मतलब है यहाँ पे, इनमें से किसी को भी हम ट्रांसफर नहीं कर सकते. All right. So for that purpose, option D is the correct answer. None of the above can be transferred. इनमें से किसी को भी ट्रांसफर नहीं किया जा सकता because option A, B, C में क्या क्या दिया गया है, only 1, 2 and 3 cannot be transferred. ये तो नहीं है, even 4 cannot be transferred. Only 2 and 3 and 4 cannot be transferred. All 1, 2, 3, 4 can be transferred. चारों ही untransferable है. For that purpose, option D is the correct answer. That is, none of them can be transferred. And accordingly, इनके clauses दिए गए हैं. See, section 6 has been given here verbatim, in which the spec succession has been dealt under sub clause 1. All right. Then we have the easement cannot be transferred apart from dominant heritage in clause C. Then the mere right to sue cannot be transferred under clause E. The public office cannot be transferred, nor can the salary of the public office can be transferred in clause F. All right. So all these things cannot be transferred. So accordingly, option D is the correct answer. None of them can be transferred. Last question for the day, that is question number 50, which talks about, again, a question from TPA, where on a transfer of property, an interest therein is created in favor of a person without specifying the time when it is to take effect, or the terms specifying that when it is to take effect forthwith. Forthwith means immediate, or happening of an event which must happen. Such interest is. अब यहां पे क्या बोला गया है, यहां पे बोला गया है कि किसी भी ट्रांसफर ऑफ प्रॉपर्टी में when it is not mentioned कि ये जो इंटरेस्ट है ये ट्रांसफर कब होगा, और the transfer of an interest from one person to another is dependent upon a condition which must happen. That means a certain condition, not an uncertain condition. Even though it is dependent upon a condition, but that condition upon which the transfer is dependent is not an uncertain condition. It must happen. That means it is a certain condition. ऐसे rights को बोला जाता है a vested interest. Such an interest is known as a vested interest. Option B is the correct answer. Contingent interest नहीं होगा, because contingent interest में the transfer of an interest is dependent upon an event which may or may not happen. That means uncertainty. But in vested interest, the dependency is upon the condition which must happen. That means certainty. That means हम यहाँ पे vested interest की बात कर रहे हैं, and it cannot be a perfect interest or an agreement to sell. So the answer is option B, which is dealt under section 19 of Transfer of Property Act. Vested interest, option B. And explanation में section 19 has been given, which is basically exactly the same language which has been used under section 19 जो question में दी गई थी. So the answer is option B, that is vested interest. So this was the last question, the 50th question. So in this video we discussed from question number 1 to question number 50. Remaining questions, it will be dealt in another segment of another video basically, but these questions, these 50 questions that we have done today, these are very, very, very important because these are a blend. यहाँ पे हमने mixture of questions देखे. We saw direct questions also, we saw conceptual questions also, We saw scheduled based questions also, etc. So basically, these are very important for those who are preparing for Himachal Pradesh Judicial Services, which is almost there. The exam is almost there. So please refer to these questions. This will be very helpful for you people to prepare and to appear in the HPJS Civil Judge exam prelims. Alright, so this was all about today's video. I wish you all the best to basically all the candidates who are going to appear for the exam. So my best wishes to all of you. All the best for your exam. Prepare well, prepare according to the Bayer Act. Go through the Bayer Act, read or learn the keywords of the Bayer Act, refer the MCQ, specifically these 50 questions, and you will definitely do well. So thank you so much. Have a nice day. Take care.